Joining us on the Farm Bureau guest line, although he is in studio with me. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Good to see you.
What's up, buddy?
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. So we were on our work call this morning kind of talking about what we were going to do, and Michael Borky brought up the story that was, I guess, first on On3 Sports this morning, talking about the collective association. 7 schools that have kind of banded together, formed a bit of a consortium. Those 7 schools are Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Florida State, Southern Cal, Michigan, and Penn State. So we made a lot of fun a year ago, or a couple of years ago, when the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the ACC, we said they had their little their group of very, very, very good friends, and that didn't go very well for them with Kevin Warren and company. Is this just a group of good friends, or what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, nothing speaks more to the NIL than this whole relationship. Like me personally, and whoever else would ever thought that these 7 schools would all join together and say, "Hey, let's all work together to, fix this thing." And so. Really, I think, Richard, the long and short of it is, I think, we were up in D.C. a month and a half ago with speaking on a congressional panel. Some of those other collectives were there. You had Charlie Baker from the NCAA. You had a bunch of our head coaches, a bunch of athletic directors. We had some school presidents there. And I think what we all kind of came away with is that federal intervention in NIL is probably a ways away. And even if there is –
Wait, hold on a second. You mean Congress isn't going to act quickly on something?
Can you believe that? I mean,
we've never talked about that on this show.
I know, never. Can you imagine being naive to think that the federal government is going to fix something like this? But I think what we've realized is that, that's going to be a long way away. And even whenever they do act, do they have the right information to act and pick the right things? Because – in the NIL landscape right now, there is a ton of positive out there. There's a lot of really good things going on. Like I just got through meeting with our women's basketball team and talking about some of the partnerships we're working on with them, and to see the look on those young ladies' faces about what this platforms are giving them. Like there is a lot of really good things and a lot of good news. So I don't want to act like, oh my gosh, this thing is headed for disaster. But there are some things that need addressing, and there are some pain points that we all see now and down the road that are coming. And so the collectives, we kind of all got together and coming out of that the D.C. meeting and saying, look, the collectives across the country are at the point of intersection for all this commerce. We have to deal with the universities. We have to deal with the players. We have to deal with the NCAA. We have to deal with the donors, the corporate brands. All the stakeholders that are involved in college athletics and specifically NIL have to come through the collective, the way it's structured right now. So we should really be a think tank, a sounding board, and a facilitator to give real information, tangible information to the really smart people in this conversation so they can make the best decisions. And we just felt like leaving there that the Power 5 commissioners are the ones that probably have the most power and the most realistic opportunity to fix some of these things that need fixing. And so we went together and put together a cross-section of collectives from the Power 5. There'll be a few more other collectives joining as well. So we can represent all the different groups and throw out some common sense ideas, real-time information, not the anecdotal information the NCAA loves to attach themselves to, and try to be a bridge to address whether it be an agent registry, whether it be uniformity on state law, whether it be a rev share that doesn't involve employment, things of that nature, best practices. And that's really, again, I never thought I'd be sitting there saying, I'm working with Tennessee and Georgia on something, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I hope you've got a minute because I got a lot of questions based on those few things that you said. But I want to start with this, which isn't necessarily related to NIL specifically. Testifying before a congressional panel in D.C. You've been a lot of places. You've done a lot of cool things. You played in some big stadiums when you were at Ole Miss. Obviously, you've worked internationally with Under Armour. Have you ever had an experience like that?
No.
Was it at all kind of nerve-inducing?
Well, it wasn't, and there's a difference from what we were doing and being in front of a panel on C-SPAN where they're talking about anti-trade, trust and, some of the other issues that are going on with our country right now. So it wasn't quite the pressure cooker of that. It was a little more, I wouldn't say laid back, but it wasn't as formal as that. But you still had to walk into that room with all these stakeholders, these congressional leaders and lawmakers, and really know that everything you say is going to be challenged, is going to be analyzed, and really, the Grove Collective, we were the only collective actually on the panel. So I was speaking not only on behalf of the Grove Collective and Ole Miss, but also all the other collectives out there. So it was that was probably the most nerve-wracking, in making sure that the things that I was trying to articulate covered all those different groups that I was representing. And when you got Charlie Baker sitting in the room, the head of the NCAA, that adds another level to it, because I'll just tell you, he was not fired up about being there. You could tell he was annoyed, and he was pretty put out by some of the comments that were made in that room that day. But again,
But he also knew what he was walking into when he took on that role, because so this group, the collective association made up of these 7 schools, and you said more coming on that we were talking about just a second ago, it kind of strikes me as the anti-NCAA, because when you think about where we are with regard to NIL, pay for play, however you want to describe it, transfer portal, all of these things, the NCAA for the longest time buried its head in the sand while they were fighting frivolous lawsuits and wasting a bunch of money, whereas it sounds to me like you're saying, okay, as a group of collectives trying to influence conference commissioners, we want to see if we can come up with a proactive solution?
Yeah, well, again, I do think that's why I was so kind of a little disappointed in his demeanor that day, because I'm like, surely he knew this was what he was getting into. And he did say, look, the NCAA stuck their head in the sand and they've created a lot of this problem. He did say that. I think the hard part for him is he's trying to wrangle something back in, and he's trying to govern all the institutions at all the levels, Power 5, Group of 5, D2, D3, all that, in the same format. And that's just not the reality of college athletics now. So I think that's a challenge that he has. I think as a collective, if you read the press release today, we threw out a couple of things that he listed that day in the meeting. He wanted an agent registry. We're all for that. And you know what? There's a great model with the NFLPA, the NBAPA, Major League Baseball, that we could take and retrofit to form our own registry to keep the bad actors out of this. So I think that's something we share common ground with him on. Uniformity on state law, oddly enough, we agree with that. And we do think there needs to be some uniformity. Now, there could be nuances here and there, but there need to be some common sense. Right now I feel like all these new amendments to all these state statutes are a race to the bottom right now. And, all these states are trying to find these competitive advantages because they have that ambiguity now to do it. And so we're for it.
I mean, how about the power of college football there, where you have legislators in states all across the Southeast saying, okay, what can we do to give the schools in our state an advantage? We don't care what it looks like. Just give them an edge.
Yeah, and protect them from any enforcement. So literally they write in the state statute, you do this, and we're going to make sure the NCAA can't mess with you.
Which made a couple of weeks ago really fascinating when the NCAA sent the newest memo out that said you're a volunteer member of this organization. And Ross Bjork, the AD at Texas A&M, said, yeah, the law of the state of Texas is what we'll be abiding by.
Exactly. And he's right.
And there's nothing the NCAA can do about that.
Exactly. And I don't think Ross loves that position he's in, but he's right. And, people are going to follow that state statute. And so I think that's where we can say, look, if we could come up with those commonality points with the NCAA to give them a few wins, but also come up with a rev share with the Power 5 schools that is the carrot to get people to agree to be regulated and enforced by a certain group. The NCAA has always used the stick approach. You've got to do this. You've got to force people to do this. Well, now let's offer the carrot in the form of some revenue distribution from where real NIL values derive from. TV money, partnership money that is pouring into these Power 5 conferences. Let's pull some of that aside, use that as a carrot, and say if you take that money, you have to agree to be regulated and enforced by this group, and your state statute has to fall within this realm. And that way you at least get some commonality and you get a level play field. Then it's on the school and those collectives to manage their money, play money ball, raise additional money. You can still separate yourself from the pack there. And so you can still create competitive advantage.
All right, so let's pick up the conversation about revenue sharing, and then we'll hit on an NIL buzzword that has grown recently donor fatigue. Well, with Walker Jones from the Grove Collective, he is maybe kind of the de facto spokesperson for the collective association. I don't know. They're still kind of putting it all together. He doesn't mind getting behind a microphone and talking a little bit, so he's hanging out with us. Did I just give you a title that you didn't want or is not yours?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I want that title or not. But, look, at this point, everybody there's so much noise out there. Again, trying to consolidate the message, I think, is important.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the reason why we tried to get this all together. So it's really those 7 collectives really kind of came together, number one, because of geography and the Power Five, but also, too, they're run by people that are like-minded, a lot of business people that have some of the similar background that I had, and we all kind of look at things similarly. And that's kind of really how the genesis of it kind of came together.
Yeah. So you mentioned revenue sharing a second ago, which at times might be considered a dirty word. There's some athletics directors that would consider that to be a bit of a dirty word. But you and I talked earlier today, and you think that revenue sharing is a big part of the answer here, and this might actually be something that athletics directors could get behind.
Yeah, and Richard, you're right. I mean, 6 months ago when I heard rev share, I got a knot in my stomach,
and forgive me for interrupting, but you've also heard senators in D.C. talk about revenue sharing and talk about 50-50 splits, which is just, that's not sustainable for college athletics.
It's the death to college athletics. It's the death that, like, if you go to a 50-50 rev share like California's trying to say, then Keith Carter and the other athletes are going to say, okay, what 9 sports am I cutting? Like, really, that's the reality of what you're running into. So, and you're running into employment status. Almost every student athlete I have talked to does not want to be an employee. They want to be a student athlete. Okay. They don't want to be governed by a union. They don't want to be, regulated that way. And I think we lose a lot of the essence of what makes college athletics great if we go that route. So I think the hard truth is there is some sort of rev share coming at some point. Now, my argument would be to Greg Sankey and the other 4 Power 5 commissioners would go ahead and get ahead of it. Go ahead and preempt that and put one in place that is much more palatable to everybody's budget, that addresses donor fatigue, that solves for trying to create uniformity, again, being the carrot that drives out there, and it gets ahead of a federal preemptive revenue share that could be catastrophic for college athletics. I think most people that you talk to will tell you it's coming. So if we kind of know it's coming, and there's so many millions and billions of dollars pouring in on TV rights and partnerships and sponsorships, let's create our own model that gets around the employment status, doesn't bring Title IX in a major way, but allows these athletes. Also, here's the other thing, too, if you're a student athlete, it creates a longer-term sustainable model. So more athletes can share in NIL.
So you don't think NIL as it exists today, where you are asking fans, boosters, businesses to contribute money on an annual basis with limited knowledge of where that money is really going, you don't think that's a sustainable model?
I don't think it's sustainable at the level we're at now.
Okay.
I think it's still, NIL doesn't go away, but I think, Richard, it doesn't stay at this same volume and this same level. I think, values will go down. The ability to create opportunities for your non-revenue sports goes down. Those type things suffer. And if it's solely on the backs of your donors and at the whims of wins and losses, then you're going to have a very, very small percentage that can sustain at this level. The rest are going to have to pull back to some degree. So that's what I'm saying is, look, for the good of the student athletes, let's give them a little piece of that pie that then helps create some uniformity, but also some sustainability. And I think that's what we're talking about.
All right, so you alluded to television rights, and we know that there are massive amounts of money that are coming in there, but you've also got 2 conferences that are in a different league than everybody else, the SEC and the Big Ten. Correct. Massive television deals. The ACC stuck with their deal for a long time. The Pac-12 still trying to negotiate one, and the Big 12 got a good deal. Maybe not SEC, Big Ten good, but a good deal. So when you talk about a revenue sharing model on a school by school basis, are you talking about a percentage of revenue, or are you talking about a flat dollar amount? And I guess I ask that because obviously the checks that Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Georgia get from the conference are bigger than the ones that Duke and Clemson and Florida State are getting.
Yeah. I think, look, you could argue it both ways, and there's pros and cons to both. If you did a percentage of revenue basis, then maybe the gulf between the haves and the have-nots continues to widen again because you have another factor now in there. That could be a potential negative, but it also speaks to maintaining, some of that competitive landscape that we have now. I think that if you went to a flat fee, or you said, hey, here's a percentage of allocation you can use of your distribution, up to 10% or up to 15%. And a school may say, you know what, we're only going to use 5% because we think we have other things. Like Vanderbilt may say, you know what, NIL is important, but our reputation as academic school is still really powerful, so we don't probably need to use all 15% on NIL, and we want to continue to use those other funds for the other things that we're doing, so we're only going to use 5%. You can maybe put it on the school that way and say, you can cap the amount that they can use, but they can choose to use within their budget a percentage up to that point. And then the athletic directors in the collective, and I do think you have to have one designated collective that has access to those funds so you can manage them, you can govern them, you can create a one-stop shop, so to speak. So that collective and that AD can work hand in hand then to kind of play the money ball game, the budget game. How do we want to spread? Where do we have our weaknesses? Where do we want to deploy funds? So I think really that's more of the model that I think. Again, I'll leave it to smarter people like Greg Sankey, who is an incredibly intelligent human being, and I'm glad he's our conference commissioner, to come up with the best way. I'm not sitting there saying, hey, this is what you should do because it's foolproof. What I'm saying is let's talk about some options and see which one works the best and try to figure it out. Right now, it's taboo for anybody to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it on a national scale. So this collective association, part of what we want to accomplish is to be a fire starter for the dialogue and to go, hey, shoot holes in it. Tell us we're wrong here. Tell us you like this here. Hey, I like that, but I would change this. That's a win. That's not happening right now, and that's what we want to create. So I would love for Greg Sankey or Jim Phillips at the ACC to go, hey, TCA, the Collective Association, good thoughts, really good starter here. Got to talk about a few of these issues here, or maybe this isn't feasible here, but generally I like the conversation. Let's take it to the next level.
So the idea is get these commissioners talking, get them to collectively, maybe a bad use of the word there, come to an agreement of, hey, we're all willing to put these guidelines, these rules in place, and we're willing to follow them. What's a timeline for that happening?
Well, I think you're probably talking about spring of 25. I think you're going to get into football now, and football.
So we're summer of 23 right now.
I mean, excuse me, spring of 24. Sorry, I was wrong.
Okay.
I got ahead of myself.
So less than a full calendar year.
Less than a full calendar year. I think this could be something that could be talked about, discussed, debated, negotiated during the fall and into the spring of 24. And then for this time next year, rolling into the fall season of 24, you could have something in place. Now, some of the TV negotiations, that's where you run into some of the other issue where, and again, that's where a conference commissioner may go, hey, look, guys, yeah, in theory, that's a great idea, but we would have to amend our current rights agreement, our TV rights agreement. We'd have to change this. We'd have to bring ESPN. We'd have to bring Fox in. Et cetera, and we'd have to have them part of the conversation, and they would have to agree to certain pieces of it. They may have some financial or some legal stipulations in their deal that may have to be addressed. So I think you got to give yourself time for that, for them to be able to go to those partners and say, here's what we're thinking, and maybe have to rework some of the pieces of their agreement that would line up with this. So some
of which may be, hey, we need some more money. Can you help?
It may be, hey, look, yeah, we need more money. Or, hey, we need the ability to distribute some of this money in a different way.
Yeah.
Or these athletes now have a direct tie into ESPN to some degree.
Thanks so much for your